All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, friend of the show, David Sirota, is out with a pretty explosive report about political corruption and how hero Governor Andrew Cuomo may have fueled an explosion of coronavirus cases in New York nursing homes. Subscribe, by the way, to David's Substack. He is doing phenomenal work over there. All right, so you may already know that up until just the past couple of weeks, Cuomo had actually mandated that nursing homes take recovering COVID patients back in, with predictably disastrous results for the residents of those nursing homes. An outrageously bad decision, which shockingly his brother Chris just hasn't found the time to ask him about across many interviews. But Sirota's reporting reveals even more than that. So here's essentially what happened. Back in 2018, while Cuomo was facing a primary challenge in his re-election thanks to his habit and obsession with destroying progressives, he got a very helpful and very large contribution into an allied committee that was supporting his campaign. It was over $1 million, and it came from a lobbying group representing hospitals, some of which own nursing homes. Now, what did they get in exchange for that big election year investment? Well, Sirota writes, less than 2 years after that flood of cash from the Greater New York Hospital Association, Cuomo signed legislation last month quietly shielding hospital and nursing home executives from the threat of lawsuits stemming from the coronavirus outbreak. The provision, inserted into an annual budget bill by Cuomo's aides, created one of the nation's most explicit immunity protections for healthcare industry officials, according to legal experts. Now, this lobbying group that gave Cuomo that big contribution, by the way, readily admits that they aggressively pushed for this exact immunity provision. This turns out to matter quite a lot, and in a really terrible way. According to a report touted by Democratic opponents of that immunity provision, an overwhelming 76% of total nursing home deaths come from states that have granted them similar legal immunity. And make no mistake about it, the story of COVID death has disproportionately been a story of nursing homes. One analysis found that a full 43% of coronavirus deaths came from nursing homes, and it's entirely possible, by the way, that those numbers are undercounted. Cuomo's push to shield executives from liability, according to the data, contributed to those dire numbers. In fact, corporate liability shield of the sort touted by Mitch McConnell in broad form, or implemented here by Cuomo in this specific nursing home form, leads to exactly the sort of irresponsible corner-cutting corporate negligence that fuels coronavirus outbreaks and death. But the story I want to tell today isn't just about Cuomo's bad decision-making and how it helped exacerbate and feed the worst outbreak in the entire country. No. The story I want to tell today is about media complicity in political corruption and fealty to their partisan masters. David is, of course, a legit journalist who broke a really important story here that helped deepen our understanding of what is happening in New York right now and why. A story, by the way, that cable news claims to care a lot about. Yet sadly and predictably, the only people who covered it were the cynical actors over at Fox who embrace it because it hurts Team D. Over at MSNBC, there's been nothing but silence since this looks bad for a Democrat. And over at CNN, they're too busy asking hard-hitting questions like this.
This is the normal swab I'm holding up here now, and for everybody at home. A very valuable object. There's only one company in the entire country that makes these up in Maine. All right, here's the swab. Is it true that this was the swab that the nurse was actually using on you, and that at first it went into your nose and disappeared, so that in scale, this was the actual swab that was being used to fit up that double-barrel shotgun that you have mounted on the front of your pretty face?
Important stuff there. MSNBC, of course, been too busy going full govern me daddy, waxing poetic about what an amazing, incredible, perfect national leader Cuomo has been.
Cuomo, everything Trump isn't. Honest, direct, brave.
You are not supposed to be fawning over these politicians. You're not supposed to be treating them like your fantasy boyfriend or your celeb crush. Sirota himself made an excellent point about this whole situation. He tweeted, if Trump had done something like this, it would rightly be 24/7 news every single day for weeks. There would be roundtables of very serious pundits debating it and fretting about it. But because it's Cuomo, it's barely even news on television. Of course, in that alternate universe, it would be Fox, which was pretending to ignore the story, pretending it didn't exist, let it interrupt their homages to our fearless leader. It's partisan hackery and blatant shilling all around. So gross and so blatant, and ultimately a disservice not only to the American people, but the cause of truth that they claim to care so much about. Because when you ignore this type of corruption from Cuomo, how much credibility do you really have to call it out from Trump or from Richard Burr or any other Republican? And of course, David, who broke an important story here, will get nothing but crap from liberals that he dared publish a story about one of their symbolic resistance tokens, citing as proof the fact that Fox picked it up. In other words, he's given up ground in the eternal messaging war that doesn't actually care about anything resembling the truth, only about which story is good for which team. Who can we look to in these troubled times when partisan spin is everywhere and honest brokers are few and far between? Luckily, our corrupt protagonist himself offered the most pablum possible tweet, which may ironically offer a path forward. Governor Cuomo urges us to put politics aside for a single moment. It's not red and blue, it's red, white, and blue. We need to act like the United States of America. That's right, Governor, we do. And that means in the midst of a pandemic, which has claimed 100,000 American lives and untold millions of jobs, journalists concerned should maybe be holding politicians to account rather than chumming it up with their brother or shamelessly carrying water for their preferred political team. And Cyrus, it's interesting because we actually have some exclusive polling here. We asked Americans what their top issue concern was, and it wasn't actually immigration or the economy or guns or climate, any corruption, political corruption. And that is exactly what is being hidden here, just ignored completely. A really, truly problematic, explosive story by both CNN and MSNBC because it happens to be inconvenient for the Democrats.
And it's actually been from the very beginning on this story, the nursing home story, which we've covered here, which is that order in order to have nursing homes accept coronavirus patients. I mean, look, I'm not saying the governor intentionally did this. I'm saying that order condemned a lot of old people to death. That is the absolute truth of that, and that the reversal on that is what was a direct result to the healthcare statistics that we had at the time. It was reversed for a reason, and Governor Cuomo does not take responsibility for that whatsoever. There needs to actually be accountability.
And no one's forcing him to take responsibility for it. That is your job.
Right, his own brother is out there, talking. He's like, oh, in your giant nose. Well, it's like this childhood boy antics. I mean, everybody recognizes, even The Atlantic wrote, CNN chooses ratings over ethics, having the brother interview the sitting governor and not asking a single question about these nursing homes. And as David points out, you can look at the corrupt pipeline of so much of these things. And look, this is endemic to so much of the healthcare industry and the way that they play the game and the way that they funnel money to exactly what they want and game the Medicare system and all of that. And you can see exactly that, which is that this is the perfect nexus, and they refuse to cover it. Like the Trump press conference and, a Trump statement on one thing, hydroxychloroquine. How much airtime has been spent on hydroxychloroquine and fish tank cleaner and all this other nonsense?
Or how about whether he was wearing a mask at a particular event or not? And look, we both think he should be wearing a mask. It is an important example. Fine, I get it. But the obsession over those sorts of things. The other part of it, though, and I think it was Zed that we talked to about this, is the way that these politicians often get covered rather than as public figures to be held to account with a record that should be analyzed to determine, whether it was good for the public or bad for the public. They're treated like celebrities. They get like this sort of celeb culture, personality-driven coverage, so that the only thing that matters about Andrew Cuomo is his commanding presence in his press briefings, rather than it's such a shallow surface theater level analysis rather than actually digging into, look, New York had the worst outbreak in the country. Now, I'm not saying that is all their fault, but there is some fault there. Let's dig in. What happened? Because it's not just about let's kick Andrew Cuomo and let's assign blame, and Bill de Blasio too, by the way. It's not just about that. It's about, look, we're still in the middle of these things. What bad decisions were made that we can learn from so that more Americans don't die?
It's such a shallow. I mean, look, did President Bush look authoritative whenever he took us to war in Iraq? Yeah. Does that mean it was good? No. I mean, it's bad. I mean, again, these are if that's the surface level commander-in-chief energy that you're going for, it belies the actual policy that was implemented under that person. And this is a very key part of manufacturing consent, because you have the national media, which is based in New York, and which is, people who work at CNN who don't want to piss off Chris Cuomo because he's brothers with the governor, don't do any real reporting on this. He comes on their airwaves, millions of dollars worth of free time. And guess what? Because the Democratic base over, Russiagate, all this other stuff, holds a huge amount of faith in the actual mainstream media, now Governor Cuomo, in a heavily Democratic state, has an 80% approval rating, right? He has not suffered any of the consequences being held to account by the very people who are supposed to hold him to account, and that is, by definition, almost an in-kind donation to his political stature and to his political campaign. It is a circular, hellish way in which, as you said, people are not interested in the truth whenever it comes to this story. And actually, looking at the truth is probably the only way that we can actually save people. Because what did we look at and learn from the Cuomo situation? Is it finally spotlighted how nursing home orders and the way that we treat nursing homes in particular, the most vulnerable amongst us, is where a disproportionate amount of the deaths happen. So we need to focus as much of our energy, way more than our energy as national conversation as possible, on making sure we keep nursing homes safe.
Yeah, and
why can't we just learn from that?
It's really, in coronavirus too, it's really clear the way everything is sort of picked and chosen, because there were good Republican governors who handled this well. There were good Democratic governors who handled this well. There were bad Republican who handled this poorly, and bad Democratic governors who handled this poorly. So you can really see who they decide to focus on, who they decide to elevate and lift up, who they just ignore completely because it's inconvenient for them that a Republican or a Democrat actually did a good job. And it just becomes incredibly obvious what's going on.
Yeah, it's so stupid. Yes, Trump did some things which were really bad. He also did some things which were pretty good. And I think we've given full credit to him here on the show. I don't know why that is so difficult for so many of these people to do. He's not a godlike figure who acted perfect in every single way. Neither is Governor Cuomo. Have to be able to call it out. So that, look, all people want to do is be safe and not die.
Right.
So we need to give them the information that they need in order to make political decisions that help others live.
And not filter every story through the lens of, does this hurt or help my team?
Yeah, there you go.
Next on Rising, Joe Biden, of course, said you're not black if you don't vote for him. Former Sanders campaign national co-chair Nina Turner has some thoughts on that when Rising continues.